Hello and welcome to the third episode of Let's Talk Tactics. I'm your host, Zach Burrell.
Hey, I'm Dana Boone.
Hey, I'm Locke.
And this week we are joined by a good friend of ours from the PvP circuit, Vinny Valiant. How are you doing, sir?
Hello, I'm good.
So again, we'll start off sort of with you before we get into our topic today, which is agility in CT 101 and potentially 401. So tell us how you got into War of the Visions, your Final Fantasy background, what brought you to PvP, kind of walk us to how you got to here.
So before I played War Divisions, I played TAC or the Alchemist Code. This is the Alchemist Code is very similar to War Divisions. It's very similar to TAC or the original Final Fantasy Tactics, but for a mobile game.
Mm-hmm.
So a few years ago, well, before about last year, I started like going off TAC. And then when War Divisions came out, I kind of tried to balance both, try to enjoy both games. And then at some point, I just kind of transitioned over to War Divisions. And that's basically how I got into it.
Now, can you identify sort of what made you go one way or the other, since they are such similar games and you're already established in the Alchemist Code? What kind of drew you to focusing on the newer game?
So it's quite fun just starting a new game, starting from fresh. And it also levels the playing field as well. Well, to a certain extent. In TAC, kind of the power creep kind of kept selling getting bigger and bigger to the point where I felt I couldn't keep up. So you'd have some of the new units, the Genesis units, where to guarantee the unit, you need about 63,000 gems.
Which is a equivalent-ish of what in War of the Visions?
I guess it's about 1-to-1.
Oh. Ooh, baby!
So in War Divisions, we're getting like thousands every week just for logging in as well. We don't have that in TAC. A lot of the quality of life updates as well, they've been coming through in War Divisions, whereas in TAC, they haven't really in comparison. At least that's how I felt. Well, I haven't played TAC recently anyway, so.
Sure.
And another thing is that the grind, one thing is that hard quests in War Divisions, you're limited to 10. In TAC, it's unlimited basically. You can farm every single unit, but that eats up so much of your time in a day.
Sure.
And when you're trying to keep up with everything, it's too much. So trying to do both games, and I was like, well, I have to pick one or the other. I pick War Divisions.
There you go. And have you played Final Fantasy games before? Like, were you a fan of the franchise already?
Yep. So the first one I played was 7 when I was a small kid.
Mm-hmm.
And then over the years, just like kept playing Final Fantasies.
Sure. Are there any collaborations you're particularly excited for based on your previous games? Assuming they could exist.
7.
7, yeah.
Well, I'm assuming because, well, I'm comparing this to TAC again. The collabs they did were outside of Final Fantasy or outside. Did collabs with a lot of animes and a lot of other games like Etrian Odyssey, Shield Hero, Seven Deadly Sins, Fate Stay Night. I'm hoping War Divisions will eventually branch out of Final Fantasy collabs and go beyond that.
Like maybe other Square Enix games, like they make Nier Automata, right? And then like I don't know if Kingdom Hearts would happen, but stuff like that.
As long as it's not an Ariana Grande collab, I think I'm okay.
Oh, did you see that picture today? Is that why he said that? She had 9999 all stats or whatever.
You've seen like Star Ocean and Xenogears and like other things in Brave Exvius.
That'd be pretty sweet. Okay, so then how did you get into like the PvP scene? Like starting out with like when you first did manual PvP and then to now with like tournaments and stuff.
So I carried that over from TAC. So in TAC, I was almost free to play and did some of the monthly packs and did one Black Friday deal in TAC. and
Oh, I didn't
with
think
that
about
I
Black
could,
Friday.
I was just thinking that.
and with that I could keep up with most of the top players, reaching top 100 during the PvP live scenes. Usually, I think I made it to top 10 once. Obviously, very different mechanics. So when I went into World Divisions, I tried to keep the old mechanics, or tried expecting it to work
What
out.
felt familiar, yeah.
Yeah. So for me, that was the quick comps, because TAC is just full of overclock. Not anymore, because there are units that can just nullify CT on the whole map for all units,
Oh, jeez.
which ruined my whole strategy.
So that's gonna be like you in 3 class matches from now or whenever, when there's no quicken, no CT manipulation.
I'll just be bottom of the ladder.
Fair. Now, you said you were basically free to play in that game. You're basically free to play here, right? I believe you have a term for yourself that we
I am
come
a
to love.
bacterium.
There you go. Below a minnow.
Bacterium. We all started
So
as
I've
bacterium.
spent a total of 3,000 paid Visio.
Okay, yeah, it's not much at all. Props.
Which is about as much as a normal game, I think.
Yeah, it's like about $50, something like that. Not that that matters, but yeah, Daniel. So the 2450 ones are 40, and then the extra 490 from there would be 8. Yeah, quick maths. No, okay. So now the reason you're here is because we, besides just enjoying your company, is because you particularly focus on, like you said, quick and comps, and today's topic is CT and agility. So let's just start as a group here, kind of making sure we're really solid on kind of the CT 101, and so that if viewers at home aren't totally solid on either how a CT is calculated or how it's gained or how agility plays into it, we can get that basis before we start talking about more complicated strategies and tactics based around that. So agility is a stat, of course. It's basically how fast your unit is, and let's go with Locke.
All right. So your agility divided by 10 is your CT that you gain every tick. When that CT eventually reaches 100, your unit gets to move. So if you have 100 agility, you get 10 CT every what I call tick. We can call it cycle, whatever you want. So you gain 10 CT every cycle, and in 10 cycles, you will gain your first turn. So in a live PvP match, you have 50 turns. That first turn is when one unit has 100 CT. Right. That's probably the simplest way I can explain agility and CT.
So I think just to clarify, so the whole tick and cycle thing, we're gonna potentially use those terms interchangeably because each of us has kind of our own vernacular, and we're trying to homogenize it, but it's kind of hard to break old habits. It's essentially invisible like checkpoints behind the scenes of the game. So like if you ever wondered why like a unit, say all the units had 0 CT, right? And then they have different agilities. Let's just say an even like 50, 60, 70, 80, 90, 100. The 100 agility unit is going to get 10 per tick. The 90 is going to get 9, 8, whatever. So you see that there's a turn order of the units based on who's faster, but it's actually because the 100 agility reached 100 CT first, getting 10 times. And if a unit doesn't have 100, it runs X amount of ticks until someone does, and they take a turn. Daniel, you have.
And if it's easier to remember, Gumi defines CT as charge time. So it's basically how much time is charging until your next turn.
Okay. Yeah. So if you've ever wondered, I guess we'll just slide this in real quick because it kind of plays alongside of it. Is spellcasting speed. So it's a little more complicated, harder to define, but because there's no bar you can look at. But essentially, every spell at like base, not counting any bonuses, activation time, whatever, counts up to 1,000. Now we'll take Flare as the easiest example. It's 200 speed. That means it takes 5 of these invisible cycles, ticks, whatever, to get up there, and that runs parallel to units' agility. So as units are gaining their 10% agility, if a spell is being cast, the spell also goes up by its cast speed. So actually, it's kind of interesting because a lot of people think when you first look at the game that a lower speed's going to be faster or something. I heard people talk about that before, but it's actually slower. You want a higher value because it counts to 1,000 faster. So when you actually see things that increase spell speed or decrease activation time, what that's actually doing is reducing that 1,000 down by that much. So say like Margaret's TMR, which is minus 50 activation time, now you're just counting to 950. So if you had, say, a 200 cast speed spell, that's going to make no difference to you because you have to go 200, 400, 600, 800. Then there's no difference between 950 and 1,000. But say your cast speed is 320. That's the difference between going 320, 640, 960, above 1,000. You do it, that'd be 4 of these ticks. It'd be 3 instead with the minus 50 because it would hit 960 and go off. So these run parallel. And that's why sometimes you see, like, if you're using Victor and you horizontal jump somebody, sometimes it's like instant. That means the unit's CT was very low over, like, across the board. So a lot of ticks are happening before a unit gets to that 100 CT to take a turn, and that's why it's instant. Versus if a unit's at 100 CT, when you use horizontal jump, it's going to take those like 3, 4, or however many turns to or ticks to go off. Anything you guys want to add or patch to that? Make sure it's totally clear.
Just one point I want to make, which I think is kind of important, is that when you are in a match, you can click the map button, and then you can hover over any unit to see what the CT is at currently. So that when you want to do some more complicated, strategies, paying attention to the CT bar becomes important.
Right.
So that's how you check what your CT and your enemy CTs are at.
Next, I believe it's a blue bar for HP, it's a pink bar for AP, yellow for TP, opposite order though, and then there's a green bar under that, which is CT.
Exactly. Yeah.
So one thing I want to add on, as far as my understanding goes, is that agility is still important for mages because you gain the cast speed of whatever you're charging for each cycle or tick of that unit's CT gain. So units going faster are going to see that spell get off faster, basically.
It's not directly tied to their agility though. It's just it trends alongside their agility.
Yeah, like their agility affects their CT, and each CT affects their the cast time.
Well, it doesn't change the cast time though. It's a little confusing to word it like that, right?
Yeah, it resolved it.
There's like 2 bars happening, right? Like, so say Medina's at 100. Say she's at 100 CT. She starts casting Flare. Actually, but before we say this exact example, CT for taking, how you even lose CT. When you take a turn, there's a value for using an ability. There's a value for just passing turn. There's a value for moving. I forget the exact values if someone wants to jump in with that.
Yeah, sure, I got that.
If you pass your turn, it takes up 60 CT. If you move, that's 80 CT. If you take an action but don't move, that's 80 CT. And if you move and take an action, that's 100 CT.
So it's 60 for taking a turn and 20 for either moving or using an ability is essentially what it boils down to, right? So no matter what, you're losing 60, and then you lose up to 20 or 40 more depending on how many of those 2 actions you take, whether it's moving or casting. Okay, so say Medina's at 100, she doesn't move, but she starts casting, right? And she has 100 agility to keep it easy. She starts casting Flare. She's gonna go down to 40 from the move, and then from taking a turn. Then she's gonna go down to 20 because she took an action, but she didn't move, so she's still at 20. Now Flare's at 0. She's gonna go up to 30 in one, and in the same cycle, she's gonna go to 30 CT and 200 on her Flare. Then she's gonna go to 40 and 400. These are simultaneous until you get to what would it be on. So 40, 50, 600, 60, 800, 70. Flare goes off. And then 3 more cycles, she takes a turn. Now, in this amount of time, though, if other units were higher, like, say, 90 agility, they might take a turn during the Flare charge. And that's how you get these interactions of units taking turns before or after casting or whatever. I hope that helps a little bit, sort of clarify that and, like, when we say cycles and speeds and all that. Again, I'm going to do one more check. Anybody else have anything you want to add before we start to talk about individual units and modifying agility and such?
Yep.
Vinny?
If you have 82 CT,
Sure.
you divide it by 10, you get.
You're saying agility, right? 82 agility.
Agility, sorry.
Okay.
Yep. The decimal is also kept, but you can't see it. So if you're doing the math, it may not perfectly add up. And
which is weird because most of the time in this game, everything rounds down.
Yep. So it's not important.
Yeah.
it's not too important to keep track of the decimal. I mean, I think that's way too much effort, to be honest. But yeah, that one or two agility can matter sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
And the other thing I want to say is that you can go over 100 CT. So if you're at 99 CT, you don't take a turn, then you gain 10 agility. You have 100 agility, you go to 109. That 9 carries over to your next turn.
Okay, so that's how lapping happens too, right? Like, so
Mhm.
faster units, you'll see sometimes they take 2 turns before another unit, even though they did like a movement and action or something. It's because of these extra little bits adding up over time, and the other unit not matching up so much. And yeah, so tanks versus Katone, enjoy yourself. Okay, so some of the highest agility units, for example, sorry, before we talk about that, percentage bonuses, another kind of 101 topic. Agility bonuses, like say you're using Scion of House Belv, and you have, we'll say it's only 3 stars, so you have 10%. Keep easy numbers. You might wonder why a unit only gets like 5 agility or something when they have, maybe if you're at 100, right? You can get Medina up to 100, but she might only get 5 from a 10% buff. That's because she has 53 base agility, and base agility is only leveled stats plus job level stats. So like leveling 1 to 99, and then your ability or your job's up to 15. It doesn't count anything from the board. It doesn't count passives, doesn't count gear. So whenever you're getting a percent bonus, it's based on that base stat. So that's why, again, naturally faster units like Frederica, Ziza, Katone benefit a lot more from these agility percent bonuses. However, the percent bonuses gained from say you have secret orders on one unit, plus they have a Shadowrunner buff, they've got Scion somewhere on the team. All of those bonuses as a percent add up together in game, and it's reflected, and you will see the sum total of those decimals. That's counted as one singular giant percent. And that's also, and I will disclaimer, we had to pause the podcast to test all of this to make sure we knew what we were talking about, and we demonstrably did it. We should probably make a video about it, like showing all the stuff at some point. But I was previously under the impression that the guild statue is useless at that 1% bonus, but apparently it adds on to. So what we ended up doing was we had Medina. We found a breakpoint where if that 1% from the statue was effective, it would give her an additional agility based on her base agility, and it did. And we know the decimals add up because she got 2 agility when it was really high, because of she had like 4 different percent bonuses going on her. So that was kind of crazy. We had like a whole 20-minute conversation that we're just gonna cut out at the middle of this, but
That's what we're here for.
yeah, right. So yeah, in summary, percent bonuses will add up, but they're still based on the base agility. So like 10%.
So we should clarify that on the formation screen we don't see that bonus. Only when we go into the game do we see it. And that's actually why we were kind of arguing amongst each other as well, because there was so much confusion. But yeah, they do add up. But you will only see the added up bonus once you go in game. If you check on the formation screen, it will show the truncated amount.
So just for viewers at home, if you have a Max Scion card and you have a Medina, if you put on her, or if you just put Scion on her and go into the match, that 15 versus the 16 with the guild bonus will show a difference. So 15% should only give her, I think it was 7 agility. Whereas 7. With the 16%, it pushes her up to 8 agility, and you will see that reflected in the game. But again, like Locke just said, it's only once you're actually on the map, not in your formation screen, when you see that all the percents added up together and the decimals actually count, which is crazy because that makes no sense.
It does not.
But Vinny, I would like to give you credit for, standing your ground on us and like being like, no, test it, because we're all better for it now. So that's excellent. Yeah, I may have to.
And if you are going to test this at home for the viewers, make sure Medina is the only unit you have in your formation. You also don't want to accidentally have someone gain affinity bonus. And
no affinity bonuses or whatever. Like, make sure it's precise. Anyway, so that's percentages and how they come from base stats only. That was the intended point of this. So I guess we can move on with our sort of talk here. Just briefly go over abilities that affect either agility or CT gains, because there's a difference, right? Haste changes how much CT you get based on your agility. And I believe it, correct me if I'm wrong, it's 42% extra, right? So you'll get, instead of getting 50%, you'll get 42% of that 50, correct? Bonus?
It's 20 to 42% multiplier to each cycle.
To each
So
cycle.
the
So
10%,
say you get, oh, sorry.
the 10% of your agility each cycle, I believe the multiplier of is applied to that.
So say you have 100 agility, instead of getting 10, you'll get 14.2. Right.
That's my understanding.
Is that accurate with what you guys are aware of as well? Okay, so
I
that's
haven't explicitly tested, so I'm not talking about
okay, that's fine. So then Vitalize, on the other hand, actually changes your agility value. It gives you 25, it's 25%, right? Extra agility, which again, it's a percent buff that's going to be based on your base. So even though you have 100 agility, you're not getting 25 agility from Vitalize. So those are sort of like the ways to make yourself faster. Then there's slow, quicken, stop, CT average, Ildira LB, steal time. There's a ton of them. So, Locke, if you want to talk about steal time real quick.
Steal time basically reduces the current CT by half of whoever you cast it on. So if somebody currently has 30 CT, no matter what level of steal time you use, it'll cut the 30 CT into 15.
Mm-hmm.
At the same time, the user that uses steal time gets an agility buff. I believe it's up to 30% agility buff at max level. If you can
Is it
confirm
that much? Ooh, baby. Yeah, I'll go check the Mafi. But while I'm doing that, if you want to, Vinny, if you want to talk about Quicken a little bit.
So when you cast Quicken on an ally, it sets their CT to 100. That's about it, really. Doesn't matter if they've just taken a turn and they're at 0 CT or if they're at 96 CT. It just sets it to 100.
So they essentially take the next turn. Yeah. Steal time is up to 20% agility buff.
20%, okay.
Yeah, it's 5 to 20 based on leveling.
One thing to note that whilst it sets it to 100, it's still within that clock tick or cycle. So if there are other spells happening within that clock tick, they will usually go first before your unit has a chance to act.
Yeah, I've seen it before where I like quickened like a Victura while Salir was casting Shell on her. The Shell resolved, and then Victura got to go in with her newfound buff and do her thing. So this stuff does get a little complicated to like conceptualize. It's a lot easier if you see it on like paper or something and explicitly go through it. But we're just trying to give you a general overview, so when we talk about how we use these concepts, it'll make more sense.
It's important to note that agility buffs, like from Steal Time, Vitalize, Lucia's TMR, they don't stack. So if you have Vitalize on and you use Steal Time, it's you're not going to see
45%. It's not going to be a sum total. Yeah, it's yeah. And it takes the higher, correct?
Yes.
Yep. And then if say the 25%, which is higher, wears off, and the other one would have had an extra turn, it goes down to 20 for a turn, correct?
Yeah, if Steal Time is maxed out.
If it's the same buff and overlaps, yeah. Okay, and then so slow is the opposite of haste. Basically, it just adds a decimal modifier. So I think it reduces it by 50%, correct?
Yeah, maxed out.
Yeah, so instead of getting 10 agility or 10 CT at 100 agility, you'll get 5. It's essentially slow. Goes the other way. Stop. Wait, sorry?
I said that's quite a powerful effect. I just haven't really used it much.
Yeah, I remember that's actually how I dealt with. Actually, no, I guess that's not so true. But it's sometimes how I deal with evade units. I'm just like, take less turns. I'll deal with you later and try to kill the rest of the team first. This was before I had like high agility stuff. So then stop is a weird one. We're not totally comfortable telling you exactly how it works because there's some inconsistencies in testing. But the description of it is basically you stop gaining CT. So if you're at like 20 CT, you get stopped. You just sit at 20 CT for, as the data mines define, a third of the remaining turns. Now it's not clear how that works in terms of missions that have, say, no limit on turns. We don't know how to calculate that yet. However, when in a PvP context, it's going to apply somewhat to the amount of turns left. We just, again, don't want to be like totally like saying this is how it works because we haven't been able to get concrete testing, but roughly a third of the remaining turns of the match, you'll be stopped. So that's why, like, if you see someone get stopped at turn 15 versus turn 49, it's completely different amount of time that they'll be stopped. It's just we can't tell you the flat value of that. Is that fair?
It's different from what I tested, but
it's interesting to note that I think this is probably where I would want to chime in with how the turns progress. Like
Mhm.
the CT expenditures. Like if you're not spending as much CT each turn, like you're going to have turns go faster. Um, so that's part of why it complicates the testing, is
Yeah.
because 30% of the remaining turns is still a fluid amount because of the decisions that you make in those turns.
And then Vinny, what were you saying?
Did a test earlier that seemed to suggest stop lasts 30 clock ticks. I've only
Okay.
done one test of this, so I want to do it a few more times on different maps just to confirm it.
So this is us just kind of giving you guys an idea of how stop works in general. We are, like Vinny said, it may work where it's 30 clock ticks. Data mines say a third of remaining turns. It's very unclear exactly the precise way it's calculated, but you don't want to get stopped. That's essentially what we can tell you. You stop. The effect of it is you stop
Use
getting
the
CT.
ribbon.
Yeah, right. So you,
Yep.
you stop getting CT. That is the effect of stop. For in terms of its duration, it's not. We can't totally be clear on it yet. Hate having to say that answer, but it's just what we have right now. CT average, a little easier. Just takes everybody in that area besides Eldira or the arithmetician casting it and averages it. So if it's sum total 300 and there's 4 units, each one has 75, right?
Yep, that's correct.
So we'll talk a little bit more about that later. And then Eldira LB just flat gives CT, correct? At max rank, it gives 40 CT to everybody in the AoE plus herself, regardless of range, and then an additional 20 if they're multiple of 3, right?
That's correct. Yep.
Assuming you have, or
If she's a multiple of 3, not they are.
if she's a multiple 3, right, okay. And then Steel Time we talked about. All right, let's move on. It'll be a lot easier to talk about these in context. So, in terms of cards that modify agility, we have Secret Orders and Cactor, giving 10 and 12 respectively. There's to the unit wearing it. Then for party buffs, I think we only have Scion, right? The Scion of House Beowulf for party agility buffs.
Yeah,
Well,
I think
now,
so.
yeah.
For now.
Can't recall any other
sorry?
right now.
Yeah. So in the future, there will be I think it's a Chocobo card that gives 10% to the party. And then they just came out with a sweet looking Black Rose Helena card that's like a magic version of Scion that's going to give 15 to the party also and has a cool effect on it. So in the future, you can look forward to those. But for now, it's Scion for the party and those other two. There's a couple other small ones. Like I think Behemoth gives like 5%. Their Snowy Fields card gives 5% at max, 2% basically the rest of the time. So there's some sources of it, but I think the main ones you're going to see in live PvP especially are the Secret Orders because it gives slash bonus. So it's not totally useless outside of the agility. Cactor, if people are trying to Medina bomb you turn 1 and they just want to have the absolute fastest agility possible, but don't really care about the rest of it because the stats are pretty crap. And then of course you're going to see Sign of House Beowulf because everyone loves having party-wide agility. Let's get more into the actual kind of topic today. So how do each of you approach building teams, and how does agility factor into those builds? I'm gonna start with Daniel.
So yeah, I really enjoy diving into working around agility with your team because it's such an integral part to PvP, whether you're in auto or manual, right? So like in auto, like in the arena, like I try to keep my units around the same agility, so that's um, having back-to-back turns is more advantageous for closing out, like killing a unit or for getting in a heal when you need to, that kind of thing. Um, Whereas in manual PvP, I don't really try to tune agility as much because like I try to get familiar with more like of the team dynamic, So like sometimes it's better to have a lower agility, and depending on the circumstance. But generally, like for my attacking units, like whether they're a bruiser or a mage, like I try to keep them around the same because they're the ones that are going to be needing to react as like to different circumstances.
Yeah, I think mine I could just do pretty simply. I usually try to just push it as high as I can while also making sure the unit's doing what they need to. Like, I tend to not sacrifice agility for damage too often. Like, say a mage might want Solira's TMR for extra man-eater on spellcasts, or on magic damage dealt. I will usually pick the agility TMR instead, just because I want to keep that up. But sometimes I can find ways to get Solira's TMR in. I know, Locke, you tend to go. You like building damage, so how does that factor in? Like, if you had, I don't know if you have Solira TMR, but like, would that sway you to
So
or
I don't
not to
have
use?
the TMR, so that's
Mhm.
an easy decision. um, but in terms of agility building, I mean, the thing is, I started with gunners. So gunners, I need to go fast. If I go second, I probably lose. So I had to build a lot of agility into that. Nowadays, whenever I am building a team, I kind of look at the common threats. So for example, Medina Bomb is a common threat that you will face in like PvP all the time. So in my opinion, there are two ways to survive it. You can either outlast it or you can go faster than her. So if I'm having a squishy unit, like for example Victora, who will probably die to a Cosmo Plume, I will try to bring up her damage a lot. But if it's Rain, who will likely survive it, I don't need to worry about his agility so much.
Okay.
Sorry, I meant her agility up, not her damage up when I
Yeah,
was referring to
that's
Victora.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, that's what I figured.
Um, so that's kind of what I think about in a very simplified way. But if I'm looking at like specific strategies, then I need to get the agility to be exactly right. Like I don't need it to be high or low. I need to be
Mhm.
exact for a
Right.
strategy to work, right? And that's like, to be honest, I go pen and paper and like actually write down what I need and get to that number or close to that number.
So on
Uh,
that same vein, oh, sorry, did you have anything?
Yeah. So
I meant
that's
I meant Locke, but
oh,
you're good. No, you're good. Go.
Go for it.
so in the same vein as like being prepared, I think it's good to know going in to manual PvP in particular the affinity bonuses involved with like keeping your units within range um, when you're approaching the strategy of like how high you want your agilities to be.
Initial positioning mattering a lot in that case. Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah, definitely.
That's why a lot of people say like it's not worth their 15 seconds to do initial position, but like if you want to be consistent and like you want to win, you want to take those first turns, you have to worry about it. Like you just there's no way around it. So I was gonna say along the same vein of tweaking agility for a specific strategy, Vinny, you are one of the primary people I think of whenever I think of double quicken comps. So comps where you have a very high output DPS unit, and then you have two time mages with, I believe, basically the same agility that you can always stack double quickens to take like 3 turns in a row. Tell us a little bit about that and how you. I mean, you said you got it from TAC, so kind of why you like that strategy and then how you tune for it.
So, for tag from the Alchemist Code, everyone's just so pumped out with damage that you can one-shot almost anyone. So, Overclock just kind of, well, in TAC it's called Overclock, and that basically guarantees, or that it doubles your range by like doubling your movement. It doesn't double your range, it increases your range by your movement because you get to
Sure,
move.
because you take 2 turns. Yeah.
You use your self buff to increase your damage, and then you move again, and then you deal the damage and nuke people.
Mm-hmm.
So I tried to do the same thing here. I started the game with Aileen, so throwing her out, throwing good cooking on, stabbing through Sids. That was pretty fun. But let me talk about single quickens first. So if you're building a quicken comp, you want to get that infamous double turn in. You move again, kill something, and the opponent doesn't get any chance to react. In terms of agility tuning, that you either want the person you want to quicken either be a little bit faster or a little bit slower. If they're a little bit slower than your time mage, that means that when you quicken them, your damage unit should be able to move, get quickened, and then move again. If your damage unit is faster, what I tend to do is haste myself and match the other unit in terms of moving and actions. So you know how we
Okay.
were talking about earlier, if we both move, we both take an action, we've both used 100 CT. That basically keeps things in line. And if you self-haste with the Time Mage will then become faster than your damage unit, which gets to the perfect double turn moment. If
Now,
you
are there?
apply that to
Oh,
double
sorry.
quicken, you first.
I was gonna say, are there particular breakpoints that you've noticed, like say 75 and 80 or 78, 84, like whatever, like numbers of agility that you tend to tune to make each of those happen?
Nah, I tend to go as fast as possible,
Okay.
as fast as I can push it. So right now I've got. I'll go into double team and then talk about my team. So
Sure.
double quicken, then my team. So double quicken is doing the same thing, but with 2 Time Mages.
Mm-hmm.
But it's a bit harder because you're now juggling 3 units at once. I'll talk about in practice later how actually in practice it's still really hard. If you have 2 Time Mages at the same clock, at the same agility, then you don't have to balance their CTs as often. So you both self-haste, they both end up faster than your damage unit, and then you can both double quicken the damage unit, so they hopefully get 3 turns.
Mm-hmm.
One issue is, as we talked about earlier with the clock ticks, if 2 spells are happening within the same clock tick, they both resolve at the same time.
So you'll get quick animation, take 1 extra turn, essentially.
Yep, exactly.
Yep. So you're still going to get a double turn. So quite a few months ago, Locke mentioned if you take off speed cast, which basically speeds up your quickens, then you can mismatch it by a clock tick, effectively. So that's how you can get your damage unit having a turn,
Mm-hmm.
then 1 quicken happening, then the other quicken happening. And that's how you get 3 turns. And then that's basically how you design your team.
Mm-hmm.
It's pretty hard sometimes. So in terms of the agility of the quicken units, there's right now it's Gilgamesh, Helena, Miranda, Phoebe, Margaret.
In
Later
terms
on
of
there'll be
high
Shell.
to low agility, you mean, right?
Yes.
Yep.
So right now I'm using Helena and Miranda. And both have plus 16 agility espers. Helena has plus 3 agility gear. Miranda has plus 6 agility gear. And they're at 81 and 82 agility. Which is Helena being at 82.
Okay.
Miranda being at 81. And that one actually makes a difference, really annoyingly in game. Because every now and then I look at them and Helena's taking a turn and Miranda's at 96 CT.
Mm-hmm.
It's like one agility actually
so
matters after all
decimals or
those
something
things.
weird in the background. Yeah. Which is like all of this is great theory too. So, but it's hard sometimes in practice to really track. Like we can give you these figures all day, but realistically, a lot of it comes down to experience and feel, which doesn't make sense in a game of math, but it kind of is a thing. Okay, so who are your favorite double quicken targets and why?
So you want to, and starting the game, I aim for Miranda because she has Quicken and I love Quicken. I raised Helena because she has Quicken and I love Quicken. And I chose Victoria because she has Dragon Roar, which has a chance of lowering bravery. So my plan was to triple turn the whole enemy into chickens, and then win the battle.
That's amazing.
That was my whole strategy.
Did you ever do it?
No. So it turns out Dragon Roar only has a 25% rate.
Mm-hmm.
I just decided that's too unreliable.
I had a viewer on my Twitch. I don't remember who it was,
Cecil.
but it was Cecil was it Cecil or Basil?
It was
Cecil. Okay, so he brought a triple basic chicken comp. He had like Shadow Lynx on Dragoon, had somebody else on like Sub Dragoon who you never see on Dragoon, and then like another unit I think was using Chicken Blade. And
Leela, I believe.
Leela, yeah, and he was just trying to chicken all my units before I killed him. Basically, it was really funny.
Shout
And
out to
actually,
Cecil, by the way. Shout out to him, by the way, for showcasing that.
yeah, right. And then also, I saw today a picture of somebody chickened the two-headed dragon boss,
Yep,
which was
that's Mako.
hilarious.
Two-headed chicken.
Yeah, right. A chicken with your head cut off. This one can still see. No, so sorry. Okay, so any other so you were saying you had Victra for that. Are there what other units? Because I know there's 2 more you use, so I'm waiting for.
So, well, Victoria doesn't work so well. Well, she works well. You can't chain jumps with herself because the jumps have a cast time. So you can't jump on someone, get quicken, jump on someone, get quicken, jump on someone.
Right.
That would be an insane amount of damage. But Victoria does work because of her limit burst, with that huge range and the charm. And because you have those double quickens of that 4 movement, you get to move around and get into the perfect positioning, which is really handy. And she's safe if you get lots of charms on the enemies. The other units I use are Aileen and Ramza. So I mentioned Aileen before. She just deals so much damage. It's
that one day you,
not
oh my
good.
god, you triple quickened her against me. Oh my god, or triple turned her.
When
She
she
walked
can go.
up, buffed, and that got quickened. Earth and Glory got quickened. Earth and Glory again. I was like, oh, so much damage.
The one issue with Aileen is that she is actually really slow, because she's in that below the time major speeds already. So yeah, I can't double haste and then double quicken for triple turn. I need to
Hard mode it.
you need to manage the CT in between. And
Okay, so-
Ramza is another one.
I was just gonna say, I think when we played that match, I remember you were like very specifically moving a unit or not moving a unit, like really getting that CT in place so you could set it up. I couldn't do anything about it because I didn't want to get near Eileen, and you eventually you just unloaded on me. Anyway, so Ramza, sorry.
Ramza is also a really good one. You can tune his agility with his ninja passive, or you can have 5 movement. That just basically wherever you are on the board, I can get you.
The
Sunshine
Ramza
the dog.
yo-yo.
Shout out to him. Shout out to you, Sunshine the dog. He does it best. So he has Gilgamesh TMR, and Shout. Shout. I think they stack, do they?
I don't think they would actually. No.
Shout and
Oh.
Greg's TMR? Is that
Yeah,
what
because
you're
they're
asking?
both because they're percent magic bonuses. The Greg TMR should
Yeah.
overlap the other one for its duration. That being said, I mean, Shout gives you AP,
AP, exactly. Yeah.
Which is what
but
you want.
Yeah.
it doesn't. Yeah, not the damage.
Yeah, so he has 5 movement Ramza, just runs across the whole map, ultimate, nuke your team, and then it's usually game.
Yeah, he did that to me in one
thing
match.
I forgot to mention with double quicken comms is that it's extremely AP hungry.
Mhm.
So Isabel's is almost mandatory. Unless Ramza, he's got so much AP generation in his kit, then you just eat it through it all. You have to what I sometimes do, Ramza Shout, Ramza Miranda TMR, because that stacks. Go in, throw out a load of skills, and then I run back because I ran out of AP. And if I've got a kill, it's great. If I haven't got a kill, I spend a few turns trying to buff up, build AP again, but that's just like wasting loads of time.
Mhm.
Pretty annoying.
Yeah,
More
remember
annoying for the opponent there.
Yeah, right. The one day I actually heard about Sunshine's like Gilgamesh bomb thing a while ago, or Ramza bomb with Gilgamesh TMR, and then I faced him one day where he had Gilgamesh, he had Phoebe, and he had Ramza, and my stupid brain was just like, all right, let's keep my units near each other, and he just boop 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 put it on. I was like, oh fuck, I forgot, and then just he ran across. It was that the I don't remember the name of it. We called it Island with the really tall hill in the middle. He just went bloop over that and just like right in the middle of my team. Ultima, like sick. Did like 5,000 damage, is ridiculous. because the
So
Greg
he did it on turn
for
one.
some
That's why it's hard to see it coming. Because I mean, you see two quickens, you're like, okay, they're gonna do a double quicken comp, but then
Yeah.
you don't expect it to happen on the first turn,
Yeah.
right? Yeah, I saw that match actually. I was watching your stream that day.
Yeah. Oh man.
Another thing with double quicken comps is that your movement does really, really help. So because you get so many extra movement turns, that one movement turns into two, or with Ramza, that two movement turns into four.
Just spacing wise, you mean, like, because he has +2 over most units who have 3, you're saying that bonus accumulates more advantages. Yeah.
Normally I skirt the edge of the enemy's range, so like just staying outside of Sid's movement and then armor crush, and then you can just go quick and run in and do your thing. But then when using Aileen, you just can't. Sometimes you just can't get close enough to get that Earthing Glory on all three opponents. Sometimes you only get 2, and it's kind of, man, if I had one more movement, I could get all of them.
Ketone TMR, no. Okay, so let's talk a little more generally about Quicken in general, because it's a pretty, I'd say for a lot of people who are first getting into live PvP, Quicken's kind of a scary thing to like know exists, because you just see a time mage on their team, and if you don't have one and you're not experienced, it's really disheartening to just get blown up by what seems like this uncounterable strategy. So let's kind of talk about how we might combat Quicken with various, either a Quicken of our own or without Quicken. And then I guess the uses for Quicken and why it's important in live PvP. All right, I'll just start with my first thing, which is a big problem beginning of PvP of this game was turtling, and a lot of people didn't know how to deal with it. But Quicken can be a tool to break turtle comps because they can't outspace your Quicken movement. Like you were talking about with your 2 advantage, even just that extra 3 movement from the average unit is enough to close into the distance and get your hit off. And sometimes you'll one-shot them, or you'll at least disrupt them enough that you can break up whatever defensive turtling they're trying to do. Besides, like we've talked about Locke before, doing the whole Frederica Ayaka turtle thing to counter other turtles. And but what would you say is a way to combat Quicken, or does anybody have input on any of this?
So there have been several times in the tournaments where just can't break through the opponent's defenses. And by defenses, I also include evasion as well. If you can't hit the opponent, then that's it. You can't kill them. And also, yeah, if they survive through your triple turn, then they with the double quicken team, normally it's all in on your damage carry. So if they can take out your damage carry, all I have is Helena and Miranda. Miranda's I usually build tanky for some reason, and Helena's just really squishy. So if I don't gain an advantage with that type of carry, then I usually fall apart.
So I would like to add a little bit of my perspective of generally, aside from Phoebe, I don't really use Quicken too much. It's not for any particular reason, but in dealing with Quicken comps that I'm facing against, I have found my preferable strategy is to just go on the offensive from the start. Generally, Quicken takes some time to set up. Like you need to build the AP if you don't have it, depending on the units, obviously. You need to kind of like fine tune, as Vinny was saying earlier, kind of your slower units to getting just getting that sweet spot of like the double or the single quicken off. So my goal is to keep that from happening. If that fails, my goal shifts to keeping my unit spaced so that like you don't get taken out by whatever skill they're using, right? So stay far enough away. You're losing affinity, but you have to compensate for.
But at least you're not losing the game.
Taking the incoming damage.
Right. Yeah, it's like now whenever I play against Vinny and his Eileen, I just can't have affinity because otherwise I'm gonna get super Earth and Gloried in is really bad. Or like I was against a team who had Quicken and Victra, and I just had to make sure I was out of Dragon Dive range at all times. Actually, no, it was Stern. Sorry, that's because normally I'd be worried about her LB, but it was Stern, so I was worried about Dragon Dive because I knew he was using Pierce up.
For me, I mean, like, if I get into a match and I see the opponent has a Quicken unit, I kind of quickly scan on the left side to see this turn order of the unit. So, for example, if I see an Orlando taking a turn after Gilgamesh, then what I can see happening is Gilgamesh goes, he starts casting Quicken on Orlando. Orlando moves, and once he does, he buffs or something, then Quicken resolves, and he gets to go again. So I can see that already, right? So when I see that, I'm like, okay, now I need to, like, if I can, I need to move everyone away from, like, the spaces that would get me LB'd. If I can't do that, then I try to space everyone out by more than 4 spaces. It's the same thing as what you said, Daniel. You just have to kind of like spread people around a bit. Another thing you can do is usually with quicken comms or double quicken comms, you want to have someone that does AoE damage, right? You want to take out your opponent with one hit, basically, or like, repeatedly the same hit over and over. Yeah. So if you start getting more experience playing different units, you can kind of see what those units' limitations are. For example, some AoE skills have a height restriction, right? So if you stay on the platform in the live PvP match, you won't get hit. They have to actually come a bit more closer, or they just, they have to actually be on the platform to start hitting you. So you can start using those kind of things once you get more experience to also deal with that. Another thing, again, as you said, Daniel, was just to rush them before they get a chance to quicken you. So one limitation that I found, for example, I looked at Sunshine's double quicken Ramza comp, and the glaring weakness that I can see there is Ramza's agility. So the way his team works is first Gilgamesh would go, start casting Quicken, then Phoebe would go and start casting Quicken, and then Ramza would move, and then the 2 Quickens would resolve. So Ramza needs to go slower than Phoebe, who is already not fast, it doesn't go fast, right? So if you go in and, you could have already killed Ramza before he gets this Quicken cast, because this agility, I think, was like 70 something, right? So, there are different ways of dealing with that. And I think a lot of it just comes from experience as you keep playing more and more. Yeah.
I mean, Phoebe's not a slouch in terms of agility. Like, she's really fast for an SR unit. But yeah, she's definitely not, crazy. But she is faster than, like, Marguerite, which is so disappointing. And she has move 4, which is pretty sweet.
Just a couple more things to add, kind of more like advanced plays against Quicken. If you have any kind of charged skills like spells or Dragoon jumps, for instance, you can preemptively try to cast them on the panel where you think the unit is going to be ending up. It's kind of a risky play because obviously you can't 100% predict where the opponent is going to move. But generally you get kind of an idea depending on what map and the positioning and everything. Speaking of positioning, another play that you can make is blocking off choke points depending on the map. So especially like the live PvP map, the default, the torches, the steps, the pillars. If you are anticipating an incoming assault like that, so you can't avoid it, you can try to keep the target of the Quickens from being able to advance where they want to go.
Like putting a unit, say, between the torch and the pillar, kind of is like just a wall. Like if you have a tank or something, put them there. Like a Rain would be a good one. Or like if you're playing Paladin Miranda for some reason, run up and Sentinel and just stand there. In order to make it so they can't get in range and utilize that extra turn of movement. That's essentially what you're saying, right?
Yeah, and like obviously, like you can't always make this kind of thing happen, but it's just something.
It's something to look out for. Yeah, that's kind of the intention of all of this. Is like I want to talk about the core mechanics, which I end up getting way more into, as I knew we would. But also kind of just talk about individual things to look for and plays and like ways to play around it, because Quicken is such a big beast in this. Like JP, we mentioned it earlier, has an entire format now for their class match, which no CT manipulation is allowed. So no Quicken, slow, stop, all that haste, that kind of stuff. So it's like they were aware that it was such a like linchpin strategy for a lot of people that they were like, oh hey, let's do one without it.
I was gonna say haste does work. I think it's just a CT manipulation.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, I was curious about that.
Okay, I'm wrong then. So it's only stop and Quicken.
I think it's CT direct CT changes, so like steal time and
CT average.
And
Ildira,
Ildira,
yeah.
I guess.
Ildira, LB. Okay.
Yep.
All right, I'll keep that one in. So that was a simpler fix this time. Yeah. Thank you. Yeah, sorry about that. I thought I read it was basically null CT changes on the map, but all right, so it's basically just remove Quicken. But yeah, so Quicken is quite the beast. Any other plays you guys can think of that you want to share? So Locke, you have a couple videos that I'll link down in the description below, anybody who wants to watch these. You have one with CT average and abusing the hell out of your opponent. We talked about it last time, but you can go into more detail now. And then also steal timing your own unit.
Yeah, I will start with the second video first, the steal timing on my own unit. So it's a very similar idea to double quicken, but I did not want to have my main DPS unit be slow. So what I did instead was I had a very fast Victora, and I used a thief, in this case Venera, to steal time my own Victora. So her CT was somewhere around like 98 or something. So if you use CT, steal time, her CT becomes 49. And then that's just enough CT that when my Quicken unit starts, my Time-Mate starts casting Quicken, Victora gets to move, and then the Quicken resolves, and then she moves again. So in effect, you get that she can move. She can move right after the Quicken, but she doesn't have to be slower than the Quicken unit. She can be like a lot faster, right? So I get my DPS unit that does a lot of movement and gets to buff before attacking, but she also gets to have like 100 agility, which
So
was what I wanted.
instead of waiting a turn cycle to like haste your unit and then wait for the next time, you can just do it on that first, basically whenever you need to. Just like steal time, start the Quicken, and then it goes. That's
exactly.
cool.
It just works like right off the bat, and a lot of people usually on turn one, people come together and buff themselves. Like they use like Mediana's TMR or something, so they kind of bunch up together, and they don't expect me to attack them because they're like, okay, he has a Quicken, but he's like slow. He's like, he used steal time on himself for some reason. So then I move up and use like the Dragon Dive, and take them all out, and they're like very confused.
Yeah, and you have that turn too to like bells or buff or whatever you need to do to get the AP to do your whatever ability you intend to use.
Yeah. And so at the time I didn't have Kiza's TMR, so what I ended up using was her own TMR, which gives you a huge accuracy boost. Right?
Oh, true, yeah. And Pierce, is it Pierce up or what's the other thing?
Yeah, Pierce up as well.
Yeah,
Pierce attack up. So it helped a lot. I was able to get a lot of wins that way at the time.
Sweet.
And then the other video, was there something you wanted to say? No, okay. The other video was about CT average, so it's the same idea. I mean, I had two very fast units, Venera and Victora. I would run up to enemies and start using steal time to slow their turn down. And as I slow their turn down, I use Ildira's LB to increase all of my units CT by 60, which means I get to have a second turn before anyone else can. Except for that third unit. So I'm using two of my units to steal time two of their units. So that third unit might, if it's fast enough, it can actually get a turn in between. But usually I try to steal time their fastest units so that the third unit does not get go in between. So anyway, so I have now three. I get my second turn now, and I do whatever I do, but I try to keep my units together with their units, so it's in that huge range of CT average. And CT average basically averages out all the CT, and the fastest agility unit gets to go again.
I said, who'da thunk? No, yeah.
Yeah. And then, so the fastest units get to go again, which is my two, Venera and Victora. So I get 3 turns.
To abuse them and do whatever you need to. Yeah,
Exactly.
that's ridiculous. So essentially, it's steal time. They get another turn with the Ildira LB, do damage, do whatever they can. CT average, take a third turn, finish them off is essentially the game plan, right? Okay.
Yep.
Are there any other specific plays you guys can think of in terms of how to use abilities either as intended and just something that someone might not think of, or maybe something out of the box like like Locke was talking about with steal time and CT average?
I usually aim for that double turn. Sometimes I usually forget is that I don't need to get that double turn. Is that if the unit's just acted, it's still worth it to use Quicken on them to either reposition them or get them to do another turn or to do something or to act before the opponent. So I do find myself getting tunnel visioned into that double turn or triple turn.
Right, you want to get that sweet play, and then you forget about like, oh, I could just jamming thrust him or something. Yeah, I think that kind of goes. Yeah, it kind of goes along with what we said last cast where we talked about Ildira's TMR. We're like, yeah, you can transpose and get quickened and do some sweet stuff, but you can also just kill them, which is so unfortunate because you want to be flashy, but.
One thing what I was going to say, this is not a quicken play, but it's a transposition play that I've seen with Kitone. So Kitone can get, high movement, and she's also a lot faster. So, and she's kind of naturally evadey. So what you can do is you can start casting transposition on one of your units, move Kitone up towards the enemy, and when transposition hits, your unit that gets moved in gets to move now. Well, I mean, you have to manage your CT that way.
Sure, yeah.
And then, and for example, it would work well with Agrius, right? Like I've seen sometimes I see like Kitone starting to cast, and I'm like scared. I'm like, oh crap, who's he casting in, right? And sometimes it might not even be transposition. It might be like something else that I just got scared for no reason.
Right.
So,
that was actually. I was gonna say that's actually a good point. The whole being scared, like you don't know if they're charging Quicken or something else. Vinny, when I faced you in a tournament, I think it was the Diablos Cup. You had Helena, I think it was Helena, Miranda, and Victrix. We were forced to use an MR unit, and I knew what you were doing, the double quicken thing. And when you were approaching me, I saw charge. I was like, is it haste? Is the double quicken coming now? What's he doing? Yeah. And then it was like haste on one, quicken on the other. I'm like, I can't do this. Like, I think at one point you quickened your Miranda just to get her closer to Victra with Helena or something, and then you got to quicken. Oh, there's so much to deal with mentally. So that's a good point too. Is like you can having quicken on your team can also be a nice bluff if you're using other charge spells, and it's fucking terrifying.
Like sometimes I just use cast time just to
yeah, right. Fast cast. Yeah. Yep. I don't know, I guess fast cast is that's a
so that's what I mean. Fast cast.
So it'd be off of like Miranda specifically, but
yeah. So to the viewers, the idea of the Church of Miranda Wombo combo is to
wait real quick. Church of Miranda is in reference to a Discord server of Miranda fanatics. They just call it the Church of Miranda. So there's the backstory to that. Anyway, continue.
You're not a cult. You're not a cult. Join us. The idea is you have fast quicken user and probably Mediana and Miranda. You'd have Seychelle or Helena. Helena starts casting quicken on Mediana. Miranda starts casting transposition on Mediana. Mediana moves forwards and casts either poison barb, poison
mist.
The thing that allows it poison mist. Yep. Moves towards the enemy. Quicken goes off, or Helena's quicken goes off. Mediana then uses her limit burst, Cosmo Plume.
Presumably on 2 to 3 opponents.
Helena's, as the fastest unit, then goes next, starts casting quicken on Miranda. Miranda, you purposely keep that transposition low level. The transposition goes off, switches places with Mediana. So now Miranda is in the middle of the enemy. Miranda then has a natural turn and moves forward, does something, probably either her limit burst or just attacks. And the quicken goes off, and then she gets to use an attack or a limit burst. That's the idea of it.
And you've done it to people before, right?
I did it as a test run to prove that it works in concept,
Mm-hmm.
but you want it a bit with Helena. Helena's just not fast enough. So with the agility tuning, you need it in that fast time mage, Mediana,
Right.
or some bursty unit, and then Miranda. If you increase the speed of the fastest time mage, you can increase the speed of everyone. Again, in practice, it's very impractical. It's just hilarious in theory.
Right, because you get to do Cosmo Plume, Miranda LB plus an attack, and you just blow everybody up off the board.
Yep.
So
Hey, use for transposition.
it's kind of
Style points, right?
why Chell is so popular, I think.
Because she's fast and a quick user. Yeah.
Yeah.
She's also cheap in terms of cost. So
NMR.
class matches in the future, you are cost limited. So Shell is just popular because, or is also popular because of that.
Yeah, so Shell's, I think we mentioned it before, but if anybody hasn't heard, it's a upcoming MR Ice Green Mage, Time Mage, Thief unit that gets Thief lore for movement and agility, gets a master ability that has speed cast built in, plus has a speed cast passive if you want to cast even faster, which goes back to the cast time thing earlier. It's minus 250 and minus 250, and then also has, you know, the whole quicken package and all that kind of stuff in her Time Mage sub. So very, very good unit, very fast for what she does. And yeah, she kind of ran the show, it seemed, in Japan for the previous, obviously not this class match because Quicken is banned, but or disabled, whatever you want to call it. But the previous one, it was like most top teams I think had Shell because they were cost limited, and she's like punches way above her weight, so to speak. So anybody who's looking out, I think it's on a Howlet banner. If you're not going for Howlet, you might still want to pull for Shell. She's pretty damn good, especially if you want to play some manual PvP and do some class match in the future. Might be a good option for you if you don't have like Helena or Phoebe ready, or even if you do and you have extra, you know, stuff laying around, you want to develop something at the time.
You never have too many time mages.
I agree. Have three of them, right? And they just quicken each other and you just eat up turns.
That's the plan.
That's the plan.
I tried quickening a stopped unit just to see if that gives him the turn. It did not, unfortunately. But I think that would have been awesome.
I've tried it too.
They set their CT to 100.
I don't know that.
I didn't check, yeah.
Some science to do
That'll
later.
I think I just want to say, like, don't be afraid to try to break the flow of that like well-oiled machine, right? It may be well-oiled, but it's delicate. If you get a jamming thrust in there, whether they're casting haste or quicken, that's gonna ruin their day, right?
Vinny's like, yes, it does.
Like
So,
you're just gonna have to get in there, and it's kind of a similar mindset to getting into the whole live PvP scene in general, like just like jumping into it, learning from mistakes or from particular successes. You know, sometimes there's situations that you can't really avoid, and it's really just about having like a confident or maybe even optimistic mindset. You know, I just got to get into it.
so yeah, going against Daniel in one of the tournaments, I had a triple turn, except it was interrupted by one of his turns. And I was like, do I triple turn or do I wait another round? And those kind of things are really disruptive. So that's another way to annoy me. Basically.
just have fast units and interrupt the those ticks. Yeah, or cycles.
It does interrupt the flow, and you can't get like triple taunting spell on the units.
Jesus. Yeah, I feel like that's what almost the reason why I avoid doing these like really specific like one trick pony kind of comps, because I prefer to try to like adapt to the situation, because I play a lot more like, to put it in TCG terms, I play like mid-range decks where it's like I play a strategy that can kind of adapt to the situation, has a lot of tools, isn't the best at anything but has variety. Whereas like you play more of like a combo deck, which is like you're on this linear game plan where you're very tuned to do one thing and do it very well and very efficiently. If your opponent can't deal with it, they just lose. Is that a fair I mean, I think that's pretty
Sounds about
fair in
right,
terms
yeah.
of comparison. So like I don't have as much experience with the tuning. I've done it, like I think I tested the Church of Miranda wombo combo one day, like just to like see it happen, but um it's almost like stressful for me to do it like that, because I'm like, man, like you said about the tunnel vision, I am very guilty of that. Like I see a play and I'm like, I want to make this happen, and then I just completely, like, other fundamentals go out the window. Like actually in against, I forget who I was against in the tournament, but it was on that island map, and I was doing a Quicken Medina team. It was like, yeah, I think it was Miranda, Medina, and Ziza or something, or some weird team. And I was either going Quicken Charm or Quicken Plume. And like I was like, all right, cool, I'm gonna do damage. I'm gonna go run across the map and plume them. So I was like, Decider of Fate. But what I forgot is if I don't one shot them with the Decider of Fate, they get to attack me. So what I should have done was Utsusemi'd, because I had Emerald Echo to last for 2 turns, and then I wouldn't have lost my Medina after I didn't kill any of his units. So like, it's definitely hard for me to like not tunnel vision on that. So I do have a lot of respect for like you and Sunshine, who can kind of adapt off of that, even when you have this like oiled machine. Yeah, I can't do it. I'm just like, I have my units, and like if a quicken happens, it happens. Otherwise, maybe I just haste or Cura a little bit or something.
Yeah. Speaking
Okay.
of, I'm
First.
sorry.
First.
Daniel.
So talking about fundamentals, and you just said Cura. Like, it's okay to try to preemptively heal against oncoming damage. So like if you're fighting an uphill battle and you know you're going to be taking, or you're anticipating taking damage, um, throw up a mitigation, or throw up heal like as you're advancing on them. In particular, like Frederica with like Aziza's bells. Like if you let her get out of control, she will spiral very quickly on your team with bunch of arrows raining down. So like you have to engage as soon as possible. So one way of engaging against that kind of quicken dynamic is to try to figure out a way to get heals in as you're engaging.
It
Or
works well with Rain,
Mhm.
especially. Like Miranda has the weakness, so she's kind of sketchy. But like things like Rain, if you have Fryevia built up, Ramza with Chant, even sometimes if you have him built some semi like bruisery or tanky, like you can just kind of like inch towards them while they're doing their thing in the back, and kind of, and then preemptively cast heals, or like Vinny was saying earlier, if you randomly get a turn in between their quickens or something, you can get like a chant off or like a quicker heal. I've had it before where I was approaching with Rain, and I saw the timer was a little like distance, but I saw the like quicken coming. So I just like checked, I cast Cura, or like I selected it and just checked the turn timer, and it was going to go unit, charge, heal, charge. So I knew that I could get a heal off before the 3 turns happened, and I only got hit with 2 turns, didn't die, cured up, and then I was out of range of dying. So it's definitely putting pressure on like that, and curing preemptively is super important sometimes. Like at least knowing that option's available to you.
Both of you have done that to me. Tournaments. Yeah, is that with the double quicken comp, as I said, is all in at that point. If I did double quicken at that point, I wouldn't have got the kill, and that probably would have meant a dead Ramza, and sometimes it did. One thing, if you are trying to run yourself a double quicken comp, you do need a fallback, which is why Miranda's very good, because he's a good unit, even without just quicken. Her jamming thrust is strong, and she's relatively tanky.
Right.
If you're running Phoebe and Helena, if your main damage carry dies, either due to a misplay, then are you going to claw it back?
Yeah, like Phoebe can full life at least, but Helena doesn't really have that same tool. She has some decent damage output, but yeah, she's definitely not. It's not the same thing as Miranda when it comes to the survival department. Especially like being a wind unit in global is pretty rough. Because there's a lot of ice running around, especially now with Agrius and Victora. Like Victora's pretty popular in global, I think, compared to JP. Like what I've heard from JP is that Victora is like really popular with a very niche group of people, but like I feel like she's much more mainstream for us. And then given the fact that we have Fryevia in the mix sometimes, which isn't as relevant, but because she's not like turbo running you down or something. But there's still a high density of ice units. Wait, what's that, Daniel?
How scary would that be if Freyevia was like more like Victoria as far as speed goes? I just had flashes, like nightmares.
I mean, mine has bells whenever I use her, but that's so she can bells into LB into spam Blizzaga Blade or something in your face, and just run at you because she's tanky. But all right, I think it wraps it up for this cast, though. Thank you, everybody, for your insight. Thank you, Vinny, for joining us. It was nice having you, and also getting a little more insight. Maybe it was actually secretly researched for us, so we can beat you in the future. But no, thank you very much for the insight on the double quicken thing. I don't have as much experience with it, and I think it was a nice asset for us to have on the podcast. Any quick closing thoughts, guys? Are we all set? We have been Let's Talk Tactics. I'm your host, Zach Burrell.
I'm Dana Boone.
And luck.
And we'll see you next time.